On today's episode of She Made It, we're going to talk about process and how process is actually the point.
Have you ever felt deep within that there's something more you're supposed to be doing, but you're not sure what? Have you ever felt like you're producing a lot, but not expressing at all? Welcome to She Made It. I'm your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I am on a mission to help you cultivate meaning through the path of creativity. Join me to eavesdrop on conversations with brave women who broke through their resistances into a life of authenticity. Because I believe if she made it, you can too.
Clara Beara, Bobera, Banana, Banana, Popera, Fee, Fi, Momera, Clara. I just been dying to do that.
I'm really sorry that I can't do it for you. I don't know it well enough.
I know, and I have a sore throat too. I'm dealing with a bit of the end of a cold. So welcome to today's episode, and I'm so excited about our guest today.
Yeah, I am too. So as you'll mention later, we actually met our next guest, Niyah Jackson, at an entrepreneurship conference that we both attended recently. And she won one of the competitions, and I was in a few small group sessions with her, so that's sort of how we connected.
Yeah, and she, in order to win the competition, she had to share a little bit about herself through a video submission, and she just had this really incredible energy and presence that even if she hadn't won, we wanted to invite her to be on.
Oh, totally. Yeah, so Niyah, as you'll hear, is a street fashion designer. And what I love about her story is that she is on the cusp of launching right now. So as you'll talk about, she made it, she was a little hesitant about it first. So you'll get to hear all about her process, what she feels like right before this big launch, and what brought her to where she is today.
Yeah. And that is a question that people ask us is, she made it. And Niyah's comment was, well, I haven't made it, so I don't know if I'm really eligible. And the way that Claire and I look at it is that she made it is really a double meaning.
Yes.
It's about making something, making meaning, if it is a creative outlet or a personal expression. So really we all are eligible to be on She Made It. And that's what we're going to learn about Niyah today.
Yeah, I love this conversation, and I'm really excited for our listeners to hear it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of She Made It. I am so happy to be here today with a lovely guest in studio, Niyah Jackson. Niyah is a street fashion designer and a creative entrepreneur who is redefining the roles of sustainability and faith in the fashion industry. She is currently a grad student working toward her MBA in marketing. She has a degree in fashion design. She is a fascinating woman who has had a fashion blog, is launching a new clothing line, and I just can't wait to share with you a little bit of the story behind her journey and why she's a guest. Before we get started, I do want to have a little disclaimer here. I have 3 children who have all been in school over the last couple months and all bringing every sickness possible home. So I feel great, but I don't sound 100%. A little shaky on the voice, but I am here, fully present and fully ready to welcome Niyah Jackson. Welcome, Niyah.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess tell me what it was like to step on that stage as the winner of the pitch competition.
Oh my goodness. I was really nervous up until stepping on the stage because it was a live voting experience. And as the votes were coming in, my knees were shaking. My heart was pumping fast, and I just felt like this was my moment. So they had a commercial break, and they had a speaker come on afterwards. So we all kind of knew who won because we saw the live voting happening. And so we all knew what was coming. So by that point, I kind of had a chance to get ready. And I was able to walk on the stage confidently. All the nerves went away at that point just because I was just so gracious and excited, and it just felt like a complete moment to me to see that something that I felt like God told me was mine was actually happening in real life.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and Niyah, you, I want to step back just a little bit and start with you had a fashion blog for years, and you mentioned when you were receiving this award that God had prepared you for this moment. And I remember learning a little bit about you, that you had a fashion blog, but then you realized that it was well received, and it was, giving people ideas for how to style outfits, but there was something missing. And sort of that's the beginning of the fashion apparel line. Can you share a little bit with me about, first of all, you were only 16 when you started the blog. So how did all that start? And then how did that sort of make its way into what you're doing now as a designer?
Yeah, so at 13, I knew I wanted to be a fashion stylist. I kind of did some research on different jobs in the fashion industry, and I realized styling was most aligned with what I'm passionate about. I got really excited about getting dressed every morning ever since I was in elementary school. I was always known as like the person who was well dressed and who was creative with her outfits. So I just decided to put that all into a format that I could share. So 3 years later, created the fashion blog. It was called Inexpensive Chic. How to look like $1 million without spending $1 million. And I started styling my friends on the side, and we would do fall lookbooks. They would come in my backyard, and they would bring their suitcases full of all their clothes and their sweaters, and I would assemble their outfits for them, and then we would go photograph it outside in the backyard, and I'd put it on the blog. So that's kind of how that started. And I realized that my faith was starting to be more, just taking it more seriously along the way. And I started writing more about what God was doing in my life on the blog, along with my outfit of the days. And so I felt like he was kind of shifting me to kind of incorporate faith and fashion together. So that's when I set the blog aside, and I actually started Be In Not Of, Bino for short, which is a faith-based community. And I've been doing that for a year, and I'm just now starting to introduce the apparel line for that community.
Oh, so Be In Not Of, which is super cool because it's about not just, I guess, what does it mean to you? I have my sort of interpretation, but what does it mean to you? Because I do love that.
Thanks. Yeah, it comes from John in the Bible, and basically it's Jesus saying that just as I'm not to be of the world, they are not to be of the world, but we're still to be in it. So there's a phrase called be in not of, or to be in the world, not of the world. And so I just shortened it, and it made a good acronym.
But I also think of it as clothing.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
To wear the clothing, but don't be of the clothing. So there's like this, almost like anti-materialism, anti-identifying with a brand, just to let it be of who you are, not be who you are.
Yeah. I didn't think about it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bino, yeah. So then it was a community first. So you were still blogging, but the shift happened, or how did that community start?
Yes. So the community, it was a complete, I'm not doing Inexpensive Chic anymore. I kind of announced it to everybody. I changed my name on Instagram to the Niyah Simone, so just my name. And I started working for about a year to get all of these ideas together for Bino. And so I would map things out on my wall. I had these huge pieces of paper I would tape up and just start thinking of ideas, looking at what other brands are doing that are similar, what I could do differently, what were the white spaces. And I started mapping out a plan. So Bino does have a blog portion, and I have a team of writers for that. And then we have events, we have link ups in person, we have the Instagram page. So there's different channels. We have a YouTube page, we've done videos, and then...
But there was no clothing line yet.
No clothing.
Okay.
So in the back of when I first started, I was like, how can I monetize this eventually?
Amen.
Yeah. I didn't want to do it immediately. I wanted to get the community going first. And now kind of coincided with my time at DAP. Mm-hmm. We were working on...
Can you say what DAP is? Because it's a very prestigious design college, but I couldn't remember what the acronym meant.
Yeah. So it's design, architecture, art, and planning.
Right. And it's part of the University of Cincinnati, and it's a very selective part of the university to get into and pretty rigorous.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And you were in fashion design?
Yes.
Okay.
5 years of fashion design. And the 5th year, we do a capstone project. And so we have to design a collection to go on the DAP runway, which is kind of a big regional event here. And so I just decided to incorporate what I'd been thinking of with Beano and the apparel into my capstone project. And that's been what I've been working from to bring it to market.
Yeah. So one thing, just a little step back just a little bit, so the name of our podcast is She Made It. And often when we invite a guest to join us, they say, well, wait a minute, but I haven't really made it yet. And you shared that with me before we started our conversation today. And for those of you listening, we like to think of She Made It as almost two meanings. She made something so that maybe it's, a creative outlet, maybe it's just a personal form of expression, but some way of making something, even if it's making meaning, because creativity and expressing ourselves is really how we feel meaning in our life. At least that's what I believe about it, that it's like what sets us apart from technology, and each other is what our inspiration, imagination, and our creativity. So because you are a creator, designer, having the board up with your ideas, you're a visionary strategist, you definitely are part of the community of She Made It. But share with me a little bit about that. Well, I haven't really made it yet. That fear of stepping onto, this conversation, maybe feeling not quite worthy or ready.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've always been the type of person who's very driven, very goal-oriented, just chasing that feeling of the highest level of achievement, basically. And you're never going to reach it. It's going to be a constant chase, because once you achieve one thing, then you're now, okay, what else can I achieve? And so I'm trying to step back and not be so achievement oriented, and instead enjoy more so the process of getting to each new accomplishment.
Yeah. And I've talked about this before, that we have, one, it's so easy with the way social media and just digital access, we can easily compare ourselves. Mm-hmm. We see someone else's journey that might be a little ahead of ours, and we compare, and it can feel very frustrating. It can feel like we're not making progress. But I always say it's in the stopping where you are right this minute, being present in it, and then looking back. Rather than looking ahead at somebody that's ahead of you, look back and see how far you've come. And knowing that we're always evolving, and we have to, especially as creators, especially as entrepreneurs. The world is just challenging and requiring us to continually be agile and evolving. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And there's also, you mentioned that there really is not a destination. If you're continuing to grow and serve at the highest level, we're not finished. But I think for you, it might have felt a little bit even more present, because you're just launching this clothing line. Exactly. So it's not even yet, I guess, tell me where you are in the process of that.
Yeah, so it's not yet launched, but it's in the works of being launched. So after winning the pitch competition, I kind of looked at my financial budget of what I wanted to do with the money if I ever was fully funded. And I decided to actually cut out the middleman and not go to someone who does the screen printing for me. So since I won the money, I'm actually able to buy the equipment to do everything in-house and have my own design studio kind of.
Oh, that's really cool.
So I bought a heat press, and I need to buy, printer and some of the different things to do heat transfers. So I'm really excited about that. That's where I am in the process, just figuring out how to get the materials together now that I've kind of switched a little bit. And that is going to push back the actual launch date that I was hoping for, which was in the fall. So like November, middle of November, I was thinking. So I have yet to announce that to everybody, but that is kind of where I'm at. Just still making sure that I do things with excellence. That's something I really try to do. And I realized being in grad school and working a part-time job and having to do homework and all the other things, still run this community, doing the apparel, I wasn't giving as much attention to it as I really wanted to. And so now having the money really was a great driving factor of like, okay, let's do this. Like, this is confirmation that people believe in what I'm doing, and I'm really meant to do this right now. So that's given me a new motivation, but it will take a little bit of time to kind of get things to where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, we'll stay in touch so we can share it with our listeners. But it kind of it brings up something that I struggle with, and because I would say I'm also a very achievement-oriented person. But in that process, there's that inner critic. There's that perfectionist that comes out. I think some people deal with the self-doubt, and then some people deal with fear of failure. There's so many resistances that come in that space that you're in right now, which is really like a tender, like you're getting ready to birth something to the world that has been in your head and on your wall. Yeah. What are the resistances like in this process? What do you deal with most?
I never really understood when people said that they're afraid of success. Because I was always like, why would you be afraid of, like, I understand afraid of failure, but success I didn't quite understand. Now I understand it, because I really do feel like this is something people want, but can I handle it if more people want it than I actually can comprehend?
That's not a bad problem,
It's not a bad problem.
But yeah, there is that.
Yeah. The idea
overwhelm.
of scaling is what kind of stops me in my tracks a little bit, having to actually keep up with everything, because, I heard entrepreneurs, and even at the Ocean Conference, a lot of people's stories were they weren't expecting so many orders, and they weren't expecting to be able to keep up with the demand, and they're just one person. And, I have a friend who had to quit school and just to keep up with it. And so I am a little bit afraid of that. But I'm definitely open to the challenge, and I am excited to see where God takes this.
Yeah. It's like, it's that just walking forward in faith in yourself, faith in the bigger plan, and then trusting that whatever needs to be there will be there. But that's, that's big. Can you tell me clothing, styling, because I've done commercial work and some television stuff, so I understand a fashion stylist. Yeah. But a fashion designer, which is what you studied, the pivot to that, where you're making something look good versus creating something, what was the first piece that you designed? Like, even as a child, do you remember your first foray into fashion design? Well,
the funny thing is, I never wanted to be a designer. It's still a surprise to me that I'm actually using my degree. That was not my intention, pursuing fashion design. I did it because, I've always wanted to be a fashion stylist. And so I was like, this is the closest I can get. There aren't really any accredited fashion styling schools that are 4-year or whatever. And my dad is a professor. He's very academic. And so I just have always had that in the back of my mind. I need to go to an accredited school. I need to make sure it's 4 years or whatever. So when we moved here to Cincinnati, I was a junior in high school. And that's when you're starting to figure out where you're going to go to college. We happen to be right here near UC, which has this amazing fashion program. And fortunately, when someone works at UC, that's a family member, you get tuition remission. So I didn't have to pay for tuition. So it just worked out. It made sense. It makes financial sense. It makes, sense with what I want to do. It's not perfectly aligned, but I think I can make it work. So yes, it was a surprise. Even with my capstone, I was trying to figure out a way to get out of designing a collection. I really didn't want to, because there's 2 tracks. There's the product development track, which more so focuses on trend and branding and fashion and bringing new ideas to the market in more of like a product standpoint. So it could be like a bag, for example. Whereas the fashion design track is more of that, okay, here's a 5-6 piece collection that's going to go down the runway, and you're designing and handcrafting it all yourself.
Like Project Runway.
I was trying to avoid that route because sewing I had to learn in school. I never knew how to sew. And I didn't like pattern making. I didn't like anything about the design process.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. And what I'm doing right now, I really don't like to call myself a fashion designer. It's more of an apparel designer to me that like takes away the glitz and glam, I guess. And with the t-shirts, they're t-shirts. So it's not a whole lot of, it's not like I'm making a wedding gown or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that way I am still able to do something that I like doing. It's crafty, but it's not necessarily as intense as...
So are you telling me that the first piece of apparel you designed was when you were in college?
Yes.
Wow.
First, project. We had to do different projects and things, so...
Interesting. So going then back to your childhood, can you recall your first creative memory?
I would say, at least one of the earliest ones, is that I would line up all of my dolls and my stuffed animals. I would put pens and pencils in their paws or whatever, and like try to make them solve problems. And I was playing teacher, so I would try to make them solve problems or color or, give them different assignments and things. I feel like that was probably my first.
Oh, that is adorable. So you're destined to be a CEO. No, because really what I love about the conversation we're having is that you have this very aesthetics are important to you, style, beauty, but meaning behind it. Value behind it, but also you're very entrepreneurial. You have a very strategic mind, and sometimes I remember chatting with you that sometimes they kind of wrestle with each other, right. Like not being too logical. Or so how does that come up as you're now launching a business, which requires a lot of strategy and vision, but then also you want it to be so unique and speak to a certain population. And so how are you toggling between those 2 sides of this new venture?
Yes, I love that question. No one's really asked me that before, but it is something that I definitely struggle with. Even just during the capstone process, I had my professor, one of them was like, you need to just create, get messy.
Oh, I've heard that before too.
It was during the ideation phase where you're supposed to just have all these ideas, map them all out, try a bunch of things, experiment. What I'm doing is very, there's spray paint and there's tie-dye and it's cutting things up and putting them back together. And it's a lot of you have to get in there and do it. Usually the process is you have to sketch out your designs first and then pick the top whatever and then try to make them. But for me, I couldn't really draw it. I had to just make it and experiment. And I was withholding it. I was holding back because I wanted everything to be planned out and strategic first and have that end goal in mind first. And she's like, you need to just throw that away and just let yourself go creatively. And that really stuck with me because I do feel like even...
Wait. So before you go,
yeah.
So how did you do it? What did you do to get messy? Because a lot of people, I think, are caught in this. It's like that paralysis analysis and that wanting it to be planned and perfect before they even start. It's why a lot of people don't even start. Yes. So what did you do to get over that?
I just took her advice and experimented. I went out and bought like a bunch of thrifted material. Actually, at that point, I had won a different grant. There was a scholarship called the Fashion Scholarship Fund, and you had to write a case study, and I won $5,000 and traveled to New York and was presented it with, a room full of people like Ryan Seacrest and Martha Stewart. And
wow.
So that I was actually able to use to fund my capstone. So again, like, why am I holding back when I actually have the money to go wild? A lot of my classmates, they're struggling because obviously it's expensive.
Yeah.
So I just had to like go out, buy all the materials, just get messy. I was in my backyard spray painting things and on the kitchen table tie-dyeing things and just trying a bunch of different samples and presented it back to her the next day, and she was pretty impressed. So.
And what was I guess, what did you get out of that? And not what did you make, but what did you, like, did it transform your process moving forward, or was it, like, how did it feel?
It felt really good just to let go of control. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing that I deal with, just being so controlling over every aspect. So I just thought about that memory a few days ago because I'm like, I need to adopt that mindset again. I think I'm getting a little too strategic and thinking too much about the end plan, and I'm not allowing myself that room to move freely and be creative. I mean, I think a lot of times, like you said, really creative people who don't have the strategy are able to just let themselves be really free and just try things and experiment.
Right, but often they're the so-called starving artist. So it is that convergence of you're, because I was going to say, okay, how are you doing this without, funding or like, how are you, because a lot of people go, okay, well, that's fine, but I don't have the money or the time, or people let resistances stop them before starting. And so I was going to say, how have you been able to kind of like fund this transition? And you're saying you've won competitions for one, so that takes putting yourself out there, preparing. So that business strategic mind, it's like we always say, because my background is performing arts, we always say it's show business, and business is the longer word. So there is a blend if you're going to try to be a working artist and not a starving artist. And so where most people have to work on the business side, you're having to work on the freeing the creative side.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And you're working your rear end off right now too, because you're in school, part-time job, launching a business. So it's, sure, you've won some competitions, but you're also working.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so you talked about the launch in the fall or maybe first of the year. Do you have, and you've talked about fear of success. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the big vision for this brand? Do you have that yet?
I definitely don't have that yet. I actually was listening to Pastor Michael Todd of Transformation Church, and he put it in a way that I never really thought of, but it made complete sense. And what he said was that God, if he gives you the mountaintop, he won't give you the process. But if he gives you the process, he won't give you the mountaintop. So basically, I feel like I have kind of the process, but I don't yet know what it all culminates to. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I think when I think about just my gut feeling, I know that I'm onto something, and I know it all just makes sense. Like everything from the fashion blog to the fashion styling business to being in design school to this, it's just like, wow.
Right, and now you're working towards your MBA in marketing. Mm-hmm. Again, this beautiful blend of both of those talents you have. That's interesting. So you get, say that again, the process but not the mountaintop, mm-hmm. or the mountaintop but not the process. Mm-hmm. So then I'm going to ask you a question. What if you see the mountaintop? Then how do you know what to do next? And you may not know the answer to that
no
question. I'm just thinking like, wow, like I don't know.
It's just that faith thing, that trusting and letting God give you the steps each day, each moment, and just trusting that it'll all lead to that bigger vision that you saw.
Yeah. And I guess both of them require being really mindful in the present, either way.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's hard when you're an achiever and a strategist. It's like the chasing the what's next thing. Yeah. Yeah. I have sort of like a tactical question. Because right now, especially with a kind of brand like yours that is very much, I think, movement focused, there's like a grassroots. How do you leverage social media? How do you leverage that kind of like, I don't know, like hum of a brand that swells, or you hoping it swells? Do you have any strategy behind that?
Yes. So starting the community first, I think, was a really big piece, and it's mostly on social media. So I do feel like I created my audience in a way. So I prepped them. Like, it sounds bad,
but how did you even do that? Because we have like Clara and I have a Facebook group called Creative Uncovery, where we invite women, men who are in that space of like really wanting something more in their life, but not exactly knowing how to get it. Either they're stuck by resistances, they might be stuck due to situations, circumstances. And we grew it to a number. We're slowly growing it, but we'd like to put some fire underneath it. So any of you listening who would like to join, it's Creative Uncovery on Facebook. but Niyah, share with me your experience, because I think you have kind of a brain wrapped around that.
I think it's really about creating conversation and getting people involved instead of, like, I never wanted it to be me talking at people. I wanted it to be, this is a we thing, like, let's talk together. And so different ways that I would do that, using Instagram stories, like their polls and their question stickers, and getting people to answer questions or share their opinions, even having the in-person aspect with the link ups, just having that community together. And we went bowling one time, we've done picnics, we've served the community together, just a variety of different things offline too. But also going back to social media, just even using other channels like YouTube. I would kind of take controversial topics and get people's opinion on them. I might do a Google form where I have some questions, survey questions, and then get anonymous responses from people, and then take that data into a video, or me doing like a voice recording, audio recording of me reading out the different responses, and everyone can then hear what everyone else is saying, but it's kept anonymous.
Ooh, I love that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, just getting that dialogue going so that it's more of a we thing and not just me talking at people.
Mm-hmm. And is there strategy behind that with the fashion brand? Is that what you call it, a fashion brand or a streetwear, or how do you describe it?
Either one is fine. I say streetwear typically, but fashion brand works too.
Mm-hmm. And for those who aren't familiar, streetwear is what? Just more casual, more?
Yes, it's more just kind of like the streetwear movement right now is very much about individual expression, self-expression, standing out, looking different than everyone else. It's more so about how you put together pieces, what you style yourself as.
Yeah, and lots of shirts with words on them.
Yes, graphic t-shirts for sure.
Yeah, cool. And so one of the questions that I think, because a lot of our listeners, they might have a hobby or a passion, but they don't know how to monetize it. And we sort of talked about that at the beginning, that it is just a hobby if you're not monetizing. Yeah. Sorry to say that to people, but how do you go from this passion to a business? And what in your past, well, I guess we did have a little glimpse into your trying to lead your stuffed animals and dolls, but what from your background sort of prepared you for being an entrepreneur? Because we've talked about style and fashion and creativity, but what about just because, going and working for a company. I know a lot of students that go to the school you go to end up working for very large brands, and but you're going a path that is, there's a lot more freedom and also a lot more pressure. What would you say prepared you for that or has led you to that?
I think for me, I've always been, I won't say always, but there was a shift where I kind of just decided that I'm going to take hold and grasp and go after what I want. I've always been an introvert, and so I've always been a little bit timid and, just not very loud or anything like that, but I've always had that strategic mindset, and I've never really been afraid to just take the risks. For example, one of the co-ops that I had was in New York, and I lived there for 4 months. And when I wasn't working the 4 days a week at this fashion PR firm, I was out on the subway going to PR agencies, pulling clothes, styling my own shoots, like just getting as much hands-on experience as I could, going on these websites. Not all of them were the most legit, but like working with models or working with photographers to do modeling. And I've gotten some great opportunities out of that. One of the ones that I'm most proud of was I got to style a campaign for a luxury shoe company. And
wow, like as a co-op
yes,
student.
as a 20-year-old, I was styling a big shoot for this luxury shoe brand.
And how did you get that?
I honestly, it was one of those websites, and I think I was looking to model, and he did photography, the owner. And then it just came about, I actually do fashion styling. And then he reached out and paid me to do a shoot. And so I was running around New York. I'd never lived here before, but I'm pulling together clothes, trying to get different people to let me borrow clothes and using the little money I have to buy and return things from H&M and stuff like that.
Wow.
But I just tackled it. Like nothing really was saying, don't do this. Mm-hmm. It was just like, okay, this is going to be scary, but let's do it. Like, let's just see. So I think that really helps with being an entrepreneur because there's a lot of risk involved, obviously.
Right. So there's a fearlessness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the word. Fearlessness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess fearlessness and opportunities that came out of that, and the kind of like, what have I got to lose? Probably. What was the what would you say was the hardest part of it? Like maybe sort of a failure as part of that New York experience?
It was difficult. It was an unpaid internship, first of all, and my rent was $1,500 a month. I wasn't working a part-time job or anything, so I don't even know how that math adds up.
Yeah.
Like thinking about that right now. So it was difficult just financially. I did not like the job I was at, so that was difficult too because I was miserable. I was not using my brain during the job, and I realized I need jobs that I can actually have this creative thinking to it. I don't want to just be doing things mindlessly. So, yes, it was difficult and it was lonely. I didn't have any friends. I had to make friends. As an introvert, I had to go out and like force myself to figure out how to make friends. So it was definitely one of the lowest points in my life, but also one of the highest because it was me again, just being fearless and getting out of my comfort zone all the time.
And isn't it, thank goodness it was only 4 months, right? But isn't it those most uncomfortable experiences that in the middle of them we're not grateful, but at the end of them and looking back, it's like, wow, what I got, what I learned, how far I came through that. That's sort of what I said before is that being able to have the vision, looking back vision to see how far I've come. Awesome. So to wrap up today's conversation, if there's someone listening who is dreaming of stepping into fashion in any capacity, fashion industry, as a designer, stylist, what would be your words of advice to them?
Yeah, that's good. I would say you have to have thick skin. I think that's if you ask anybody, that's probably what they would say. I mean, criticism is a real thing. And especially when you're in a creative field, art is subjective. So like, you're gonna be criticized. People aren't gonna like it. And you can't take what other people's opinions are of it too seriously. So it's really difficult to be in that industry for that reason. But I would say if you have the passion for it and it's something that you really feel like you can handle and you're good at, and you have the natural ability and talent and skills to be able to succeed, just go for it, and you'll build that thick skin over time. Like, it's not just something you have to have before you enter into it. It's something that you continue to, thicken as you go through it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it was really incredible having you here today. And
Thank you.
Again, you have made it in so many ways. Just all your experiences, all the successes along the way, the big risks you've taken. And I just cannot wait to see where Beano goes. If our listeners want to follow you and join your community, where would they go for that?
Yeah, so you could go on Instagram. It's BN Not Of. And the website, bnnotof.com. There's also a place to sign up for the email list on the website. If you go to the bottom, there's a subscribe button there. Let's see what else. Those are kind of the main channels, and everything else, if you wanted to look at the YouTube channel and things like that, you could go on the website and it'll be in the top right corner.
Awesome. And we'll put all of that in the notes
Okay.
and in any post as well. And just to wrap up, we love having conversations with women in all different industries, creative or entrepreneurial. But the way that the podcast spreads is through reviews. So we would love your review, and we'll put some directions in the notes as well. Again, thank you, Niyah, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
So I loved that conversation. I loved Niyah's honesty and hearing about her process and her journey. And I think it's especially powerful to have this podcast because I follow Niyah on Instagram. She's very real and honest on Instagram. But if you just look at her pictures, she's a model, basically.
Yeah, she's gorgeous.
She's done modeling. But I love that we get to hear that inside perspective on, like, yes, there's this amazing brand and she's achieving all of these amazing things, but there's also difficulty and resistances and things she's still working through and things that she doesn't know the answer to yet. And I think that can just make us all feel better that there are things we don't know the answer to now, but we'll get there.
Right. And she's beautiful, and how she talks about the importance of the enjoyment she gets out of getting dressed every day, and that's how she showed up. Super cool. And but one of the things that she shared that I just want to make available to our listeners is that process and transition is really part of the journey. Like, we're always evolving. And if you're in a particular spot where you feel maybe a little stuck, or a transition is coming and you're kind of gripping in fear of how it's going to unfold, you can go to my website. I have a free gift for you. It's a guide to graceful transitions. Clara's going to share the exact place to go.
Yeah, so you can go to ellezimmerman.com/transitions, and you'll just be able to click on the picture there to download your free guide.
One other thing I wanted to mention is that I have a few spots open right now for creativity coaching. And if that sounds interesting to you and you'd like to learn more, you can email me directly at elle@ellezimmerman.com.
I'm so grateful you joined us for today's episode. I bet you're here because you know there's something more for your life. Whether you're moving into something creative or letting go in order to take that next creative step, I have something for you. My free guide to graceful transitions. You can find it at ellezimmerman.com/transitions. And remember, if she made it, you can too.